Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well on this rainy Tuesday. I wish the weather was a lot better outside, but it is what it is. What can we do? We're in quarantine anyway. But I'm excited. Today, we're going to have City of Montebello Councilman David Torres joining us. And actually, I'm going to connect with him right now. Let me just select and there. Hey, how are you doing, sir?
Good. How are we doing? And let me get
I'm doing
oriented
very
here real
well.
quick.
All right.
There we go.
All right, great. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you uh, joining me today to have a little quick discussion. We have the students from Rio Hondo College as well as Los Angeles Harbor College who are tuning in and also will be streaming this later on Instagram Live as well as YouTube and in my Canvas sites for each one of my 9 classes. So I really appreciate your time. How's everything going? How are you dealing with the quarantine right now?
It's going great. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to talk to you guys about, my experience on council and the whole path to getting here. Quarantine's been really interesting. You always wonder how leaders, came to the decisions that they came to and what they did during times of crisis. Here we are in the middle of quarantine, and so kind of experiencing firsthand, in a way what some people have gone through in the past. And of course, this is very different. The last time something affected the entire world like this, I think back to something like World War II, but very different circumstances, right?
Oh,
So,
certainly.
very different circumstances. But no, it's been really interesting. For those that don't know, and we're going to get into my background from what I understand, but I'm also a paralegal with the LA City Attorney's Office. So we're still going full steam ahead, working from home and trying to handle consumer complaints. My division specifically handles consumer protection. On the City of Montebello side and the council side, a lot of emergency meetings and trying to scramble to make sure that we're protecting residents and employees. So very interesting times.
Oh, I bet. And unlike many of us who have that privilege of getting our work done and then relaxing at home, you start your second and third shift with all the multiple responsibilities that you hold and the different roles that you fulfill.
Oh yeah. Uh, I ended work today at 5 o'clock. Got a chance to get something to eat and then jump right on and start engaging with, very involved community members like yourself. So it's definitely a job that never stops, but the ability to talk to people that are so passionate about what they do and help them achieve their goals is something that's really special, and a privilege. And so I have a great time doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to hear. I don't want to take too much of your time, so we'll get started. I wanted to see if you can share a little bit of information about where you went to college, what you studied, what was your college experience like? Were you involved in any type of extracurricular activities or anything outside of normal classroom learning?
Yeah, so I was one of those students that was always hyper involved in everything. And even in high school, I was in journalism, band, ASB, speech and debate. I was one of those people. That continued on through college. I studied actually art history and business administration.
Okay.
A lot of people have told me about, they didn't quite use the degrees that they got in college. So taking a little bit of that advice, I said, what can I do that's a little fun? That's the art history side. At the same time, I need to get a job when I get out of here. So what's more practical? That's where the business side came in. But always had an interest in representation. Even through college, I was the president of my organization, a vice president for another one for like the ski and snowboard club. So always kind of very aware of the populations that I was in. And, of course, that continued to Montebello once I came back from UC Riverside and I became a resident again, looking to see how I could help my local community. But yeah, the college experience, I kind of just jumped right into it. It's a very unique time in your life where you have the luxury of really trying to find yourself and figure things out, and so exploring as much as possible. It's kind of funny because to that end, I was actually the college mascot for
Oh,
about
really?
6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was Scotty the Bear for
Cool.
6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was there on the basketball courts. I went with them to the Big West Conference over in Anaheim when they had it at that location, and so I kind of just took advantage of of any opportunity, whether it was just personal development, leadership development, education. I just really tried to draw everything out of it that I could.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really interesting and exciting. I've never actually met anyone who is their college's mascot, so
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Now, let me ask you. I have a lot of students. Obviously, we're a community college, and our students are trying to find their path to not only a four-year university, but to try to figure out what major interests them in the
Mhm.
pursuit of higher education. How did you make that decision to double major, and how did you make that decision to pursue art history?
You cut
Did you
off
get
there
the
for,
second half?
yeah.
Oh, uh, yeah, I'll repeat it. Sorry, my internet connection cut off.
No, that's
Um,
okay.
so about my students trying to figure out, what major they want to focus on and where they want to go when they transfer out of Rio Hondo and LA Harbor College. Um, my question to you is, how did you go about selecting art history as a major, as well as business administration? What was your journey to finally select those two as your major of choice that you focused on for 4 years?
So the art history portion it's actually really interesting because I'm a kind of person that likes to learn about just anything and everything. I'm a sponge for information. Art history was actually a lot of fun, and off of one of my first classes, I decided to pursue it because um, art history is really the study of everything through art. You learn about philosophy, you learn about geography, you learn about economics, psychology, right? The way that artists express themselves and the movements of the time, the things that are important during different eras. I learned about Buddhism and Hinduism when I studied, the art of China and India and those regions. So that for me was just kind of like a way to just really have fun. The business portion was about being more serious, getting down into accounting, into marketing and advertising, which I had particular interest in. But I think the really important thing when you're kind of thinking about your major, but then also like moving on beyond that, I'll say two
Mhm.
things. One, I always suggest that students kind of identify what their ultimate goal is, if it's possible. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a senior engineer.
I think we're. Oh, there
Am I
we go.
still
We're
here?
back. We're back. Sorry. Yeah, we're still here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I had a call coming in. I had to decline it real quick.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, same
But
thing on my.
yeah, but from that point, move backwards. So look at that senior engineer and see what kind of experience they're looking for. Are they looking for someone that has more leadership, someone that has software development? Like what exactly are those steps? And then work your way back towards where you are. And so that way, because a lot of times companies are looking for specific software, which is changing all the time, but it's just good to be familiar. A lot of times they're looking for specific certifications or degrees, and so that takes some of the guesswork out of it.
Mhm.
At the same time, I think it's also about marketing yourself. Going into my first job out of college was with Rico Business Systems and selling multifunctional printers,
Oh wow.
which is a fantastic industry. I sold 0 printers in 4 months,
Oh wow.
but but in trying to get that job, um, they're asking, well, what's this art history portion? And so what I tried to emphasize was how art history is really about analyzing things that look the same and saying how they're different. So here you have a Xerox copier, a Ricoh copier, and a Canon. Why should you choose Ricoh? And so just kind of drawing the skills of whatever major you choose and your strengths in that major, whether it be communication, writing, analysis. I think that your major for the most part is a starting point,
Mhm.
unless you're more like science, technology, engineering, and math. That kind of stuff is very sequential. When it comes to the humanities, I think it's a lot more open in terms of the possibilities that you have when you exit, and the way that you draw from your college experience does a lot towards marketing yourself.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, let me ask you this. So you go from being an art history and a business administration major to now becoming a paralegal.
Mhm.
And what influenced that decision to pretty much change course completely?
So I'll be honest, that was just kind of a luck of the draw. I had a I had three main areas of interest: architecture, business, and law. Um, after my stint with Rico, I was kind of confused on where I wanted to continue. So I just sent out applications and I kind of said, okay, whichever job I get, like I'm going to make a career out of that because really there was kind of no wrong option. So out of those applications that I sent out, I got hired at a firm that's was called Fenton Nelson. It was a healthcare law firm out in West Los Angeles. And that kind of started the beginning of my 8, 9 year legal career.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Now, you already talked about what you do in your capacity as a paralegal for the County of Los Angeles, correct? Or is it the City of Los
The
Angeles?
city of Los
City
Angeles.
of Los Angeles. So,
Mhm.
I'll skip that question. And I was wondering, what made you decide that you wanted to run for political office? And prior to running for political office, were you involved in politics?
So I was so I'll answer the first questions first. First things first. Um, what made me want to run for office was just kind of seeing the way that the city was going, the direction that everything was heading in. A lot of residents were kind of dissatisfied. I had ideas of my own that I wanted to see and wanted to implement. One of the things that I was really frustrated with was how hard it was to come by information. Even as someone that was extremely interested in finding out more and kind of digging into the details, it was like almost impossible to find facts and information that were relevant to the topic that you were trying to look at. So one of my first goals in joining council was to start whatever we already had going on, internal communications that are suitable for the public, to start publishing those, getting those on the website. Our current city manager, Rene Bobadilla, has been fantastic. He uh, had the same vision in terms of bringing Montebello up to the 21st century. So we got the My Montebello app now, where we're posting memos and notices to the public, and you can get them on your phone as opposed to trying to navigate some kind of arcane website, which is also scheduled for an update, and we'll be working on that. But that I think that was the main thing is just a sense of dissatisfaction, ideas for how things could be better, and just going door to door literally and saying, hey guys, what do you think of my platform, and do I have your support?
Wow, that's great. And prior to that, were you involved in politics at all?
No, prior to running for council, I did want to do my research. I wanted to see what council was like from a resident's perspective, so I attended council meetings for a year, 2 years before I actually ran for office. But I had never run a campaign before. I had never been a staffer for any kind of politician. So I was approaching it pretty brand new. My family has a history of service in government. My father was a city administrator for Montebello for a long time. My mom was a human resources manager, so there was some background there. But beyond that, no personal experience really.
Wow. So, were you involved in any community organizations? I know that you are involved with the YMCA. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly right.
Eh,
Yeah, so um, I was involved with two organizations. One is with the YMCA, so I'm on the board there, and more specifically with a program called Youth and Government.
mhm.
And what that is basically high school students get a simulated uh, government experience where they get to choose their governor, their Supreme Court justice. They develop legislation and argue it actually on the floor of the Senate and the Assembly chambers up in Sacramento. That's kind of like the culmination of the whole thing. I was also a member of the board of the LA Paralegal Association. Again, whatever I kind of take on, I just like really delve into it and try and become a part of that community. So for another 2 years, I was also on the board of that, creating programming for continuing, what was it, learning education,
Okay.
and developing program in terms of we had a spring career conference and bringing out 60 or 70 people to learn about like career opportunities for paralegals. So very used to the discussion in terms of how do you turn an interest or a study into a career.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm very familiar with the Youth and Government Program. I was actually a member of the Montebello Commerce delegation, and
Excellent, very nice.
I was there when I was the campaign manager for Javier Lopez Ayala, who was the youth governor from Montebello.
Excellent.
And we're talking about probably 2007. No, I'm sorry, 2003, 2004.
Hmm.
So it was a very rewarding experience.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed my time. So it's a phenomenal program. I have a couple of dual enrollment classes that I teach at different high schools in the San Pedro area. And at San Pedro High School, I want to say about half of my class there, which are all high school students, they're all part of that delegation with
Excellent.
youth and government.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak highly enough about the program. It's an opportunity like no other. I've done a lot of different leadership seminars and weekends and trips, and that one is just so unique. You know, I recommend it highly.
Are they still at Camp Roberts?
No,
No, okay.
no, there's no more Bob 1 and 2.
Oh,
Uh,
gotcha. Okay.
there's no more Bob 1 and 2. Um, Most recently, they're operating out of Fresno. The convention center, I think, was undergoing some renovations.
Okay.
Um, so I think they had to shift around there a little bit. But yeah, so the program is now held in Fresno for the training set portion of it.
Oh wow! Oh, that's really cool. Well, thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that information. That's
Yeah,
really
of
cool.
course.
So you run for political office the first time, and you run against a large pool of people.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where you fell in line, but I don't think you were in the initial top three, correct?
Oh no, I
The
came in
first time.
sixth that time.
Yeah.
Out of 10 candidates for 3 seats, I came in sixth in that election.
And so, what motivates you to then say, "I'm going to throw my hat back in the ring, and I'm going to run again in the special election that was available"?
I think it was a few different things that happened. One, I was really proud of my showing in the first one for
Hmm.
being a newcomer to politics with no real basis of support, no political connections or anything like that. I took a mortgage out on my house and no previous campaign experience. Said, okay, well, this is how we do messaging. This is how we're going to do flyers. Developing a walking strategy.
Hmm.
No experience whatsoever. Just kind of off the top of my head, whatever sounded good. I was actually um, extremely proud of coming just within a few hundred votes of actually getting a seat,
Hmm.
and that encouraged me to run again for the March special election. And by that time, word had kind of gotten around that some people didn't plan to run for reelection, so chances get a little bit better. You gain a few more supporters because it's not the same deep field. That was a little bit more encouraging, and so over the next 2 months after the November election, just talking to people and building support, thought that I had a good chance to win the seat in March.
Oh yeah, definitely. You did a phenomenal job running that campaign.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get involved, but I was looking from afar, and
Thank you.
I think you even dropped off a campaign sign in my front yard at one point, and so that was really cool. But you ran a phenomenal campaign. I'll tell you this: I've studied politics for a long time. I know a considerable amount of politicians, and you're definitely someone who connects well with the community.
Thank
I
you.
think a lot of individuals, have this feeling of authenticity
Mhm.
when they listen to you speak, and the fact that you make yourself so available to the public with your coffee conversations, and now with your Facebook conversations. I think that carries a considerable amount of weight. And if you're going to plan to run for re-election, I don't know if you plan to, but hopefully hoping and praying for success for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's pretty scary to put yourself out there. I told all of the candidates that I was running with in November that no matter where you fall on the spectrum, I think there is a minimum amount of respect that's due for putting your beliefs, your ideas, your background out for public review. If you
Yes.
have a business idea, maybe no one wants a hard-boiled egg timer, but when you run for office, they're looking at your education and saying if that's worthy. They're looking at your pedigree and saying, like, well, do I agree? They're looking at your political party and your views. You're really under the microscope, so it's very unique in the level of um, criticism and critique and feedback that you get. One thing that was really important for me, and thank you for the compliment. I really do try to make myself available and be as forthcoming as I can about my own views and the direction that I see the city going in, and having that conversation with residents. Um, because again, I think that was something that I felt was missing as I was looking at council, was kind of like that interpersonal connection, right? Getting
Yes.
back to kind of small town politics. and talking to your neighbor and talking to the people down the street, and like, who are you affecting and how do they feel about this. The Montebello Hills project that we have going on, which is a massive project. I actually got the development handbook and went door to door along Montebello Boulevard one afternoon to say, like, hey guys, I hear that no one has any idea what's going on. Here are the plans, the specifications, the designs. What do you think? How is this affecting you? um, Montebello is not so big that you can't reach out and really connect with people. And so that's really been my goal, is to provide that connection to government and to what's going on in our city.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, I always ask individuals, if it's recording artists, if it's radio personalities, about their first experience occupying that role, that position.
Mm-hmm.
And then for you, I want to do something a little different.
Okay.
So election night, you find out you win.
Yeah.
And I believe you won by a very, very large margin. I don't
It was
remember
pretty
the
substantial.
exact. I was trying to be nice, but you slaughtered the competition. That being said, can you tell me what's the initial emotions that you're feeling at that time?
Disbelief, and I'll tell you exactly why. So the when it comes to election night, there are several waves of reporting, right? You're being someone that's familiar with politics, you will know that you have your vote by mail votes that come in first. Then as precincts roll in, numbers are constantly updated through the night. You can be up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, seeing the tides of voter sentiment sway back and forth as the tallies are being counted. So when the first wave of votes came in, I think I already started out with something like a 20 or 30% lead. And people were basically saying, the election's done, you won. And I was just nervous. I was like, well, there's still the entire city of Montebello to count. Let's wait and see what happens. With each update that came through, my lead was either maintained or growing. And so I was like, okay, but we still haven't counted all the precincts. Let's just wait until everything comes through. So the entire room was celebrating and congratulating me, and I was kind of there biting my nails, saying, like, "Is this real, or is this, or is this about to change?" And even once I got the final numbers, I think immediately my mind went to the next phase of, like, okay, well, what does this mean? What do I need to start preparing for? It's kind of just the way that my mind works, is that it's always thinking about the next step. My sister says that I need to, like, slow down and enjoy the moment a little bit more, but but it's just the way that I've always been. Is it's always like, what's next? How can we do things different, better, change things up, where our weaknesses, improve our strengths. So it's still surprising to me, and feels strange to me to be on council and to have the privilege of making these decisions. But it's something that I'm constantly grateful for. I don't know if I'll ever get used to it, to be honest, but it's definitely a privilege.
That's awesome. And I can only imagine the emotions that were running through you at that time. Now, let me ask you this. So many of my community college students, they're balancing a family, they're balancing work, they're going to school, attempting to go to school on a part-time or full-time basis. Obviously, you've already graduated from college.
Mhm.
But how do you maintain that balance and your sanity as you're trying to balance, your personal life, a professional career that is incredibly demanding, and on top of that, your role as a city council member, where no matter where you go, uh, I'm sure people probably stop you and want to talk to you, and that idea of privacy, or that sense of peace of just being alone, I imagine could be difficult to accomplish at times.
It can get overwhelming. There are definitely moments where you're juggling a lot of different tasks and trying to figure out which one comes first. But I think that's the important thing, is identify what's most important to you, where your happiness really lies, where your priorities really lie, and from there start to kind of pull everything apart and say, like, okay, what do I need to do to maintain? Um, you know, if you have a full-time job and a family and you're going to school, family comes first, and taking care of their needs. My mom went and got her master's when I was in high school. 4 kids,
Wow.
a manager for human resources in Pasadena, and she was driving out to Long Beach Community. No, Cal State Long Beach. I'm sorry. She was
Okay.
driving out to Cal State Long Beach to get her master's. So I've seen the kind of work ethic that it takes, and I've seen the dedication. You know, she was leaving for the office 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and doing homework until 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night. It's not something that comes easy, but I think once you start to kind of like identify your priorities, and then you get to direct your energies and your attention. I think another thing is really taking one step at a time and focusing on what you're doing. If you're going to be with your family, be with your family, and concentrate on them. You know, if you've set aside 30 minutes or an hour, you know, make sure that you're present. From there, if you're going to schoolwork, hit your studies. You know, I think one of the frustrations that comes is when we start to multitask and the other tasks start to kind of
Mhm.
invade into our mind, and we feel like we're not really doing anything because we're thinking about
Yes.
everything at the same time. I think really compartmentalizing and being present is one step and one strategy that you can take towards, you know, really balancing everything out. So you know, like I mentioned, I have my 8 to 5 at the LA City Attorney's Office. And so when I'm there, you know, I'm a paralegal for the LA City Attorney. Once I'm off at 5 o'clock, looking at messages and phone calls and responding. And so I take off my paralegal hat and move into counsel mode. And so just, you know, that's kind of the way that you balance is by prioritizing.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And then my last question to you: during your tenure as a councilman, what have you learned?
Oh boy. Um, I think one thing that I've learned is, hmm, that's interesting.
And I know I'm sure you've learned a million different things. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if there's that one specific thing that maybe you went into council assuming it was done A, B, and C and found
Mhm.
out it was done X, Y, and Z way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, well, I learned about government code 3.14.
Yeah.
Um, so I think one thing that's interesting about council, and I think specifically about my experience on council, is that sometimes the battles that you think you'll be fighting aren't quite the battles that are going to come up. Um, each council has its own personality. Each
Mhm.
politician has, you know, their own aims and strategies and ultimate goals. Um, the thing that makes a good representative, I think, is really managing relationships and managing priorities. You know, there's a time to kind of step up and fight. There's a time to sit back and, you know, let things be. Um, you know, you have to have your kind of passion and what you're fighting for, and stay focused on that. And so one of the things that I've learned on council is that, you know, not everything has to be a battle and not everything has to be a fight. You know, there are four other well qualified, passionate, intelligent individuals that are sitting up there. And so you know, it's about trusting your colleagues, it's about trusting the city manager and the job that he's doing and the recommendations that he's making. But at the same time, you know, when there's an issue that, you know, you're not quite comfortable with, making sure that you speak up, that you make your voice heard, and that, you know, sometimes if you have to ruffle some feathers, I mean, that's the job that we were elected to do, is to
Mhm.
really represent people and represent a viewpoint. And you know, it's not going to be the case where you always agree with all of your colleagues, and you have to be okay with that. You know, you can be respectful and present your points without, you know, being insulting. And I think that's what I aim to do. There are going to be instances where I disagree, and it's about being forceful and persuasive, but at the same time respectful and understanding that, you know, we all were elected to represent our constituents, and so by respecting your colleagues, you respect the people that voted them into office as well.
Oh yeah, certainly, certainly. And you know, I've been keeping track of your voting record, and you know, and I like the fact that the will of the people, the interests of the people, have continuously been a top priority for you, and that level of transparency is something that I truly appreciate. I wanted to thank you for your time. I know
Yeah, of
that you're a
course.
very busy individual. You know, I wish the best for you. Stay healthy. Hopefully, you maintain your sanity during this quarantine. I know it's driving me nuts. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. The best to you and your students. Same thing. Hope you guys are safe in quarantine. We're coming into a pretty heavy period, as reported by, you know, the federal government and our counties. So you know, use those gloves and those face masks when you go outside. But Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks. Take care. Bye.